JD Vance continues his desperate campaign bid, which he's not going to win, but he can't stop because he has some very wealthy backers, and they need him to launder their like crypto-fascist movement to the public.
JD Vance works at the attention-seeking department at Teal Industries.
Yes. And so here he is constantly making up for the fact that he once criticized Trump, leaning into like,
this is not us.
Trump rhetoric, right? Yeah. Because he'll never be able to live down that fact, and that's why he'll never win. Here he is with his new campaign ad on Mexicans.
Are you a racist? Do you hate Mexicans? The media calls us racist for wanting to build Trump's wall. What? They censor us, but it doesn't change the truth. Joe Biden's open border is killing Ohioans, with more illegal drugs and more Democrat voters pouring into this country. This issue is personal. I nearly lost my mother to the poison coming across our border. No child should grow up an orphan. I'm JD Vance, and I approve this message because whatever they call us, we will put America first.
Wait. More Democrats. I love the part. And more Democrats coming across the border.
Yeah, of course, naturally. It's a way to I mean, this is Tucker Carlson, right? But what I do find interesting is I didn't read Hillbilly Elegy because I was a bit skeptical when I was told by New York Times reading liberals that this would help me understand the Trump voter. But I did read the Wikipedia entry for it. It appears that his mother got addicted to pain pills. I was not aware that the Sacklers were border crossers. Did you know this, Matt?
Yeah, I mean, that is his mother apparently had a bunch of problems with addiction and stuff. That the idea that those all came from the border that's like Nazi talk. Like, that's it's all from a foreign invader that's making a degenerate society that's fundamentally going to kill the ones that you love. Like, you know, I mean, it's JD. He's pulling behind like several guys that got into the race after him, and he's looking for attention. But I mean, the interesting thing about JD is this aw shucks sort of. I'm a yokel, and what do you have that part from Hillbilly Elegy Wikipedia that?
Yes, let me find it. Right. So, okay, I was like, again, I just went on the Wikipedia earlier when we were preparing for the show because I just wanted to like understand is the messaging in this that I was told by family members of mine that I needed to read this book. Was it subtle as a way to understand the Trump voter, or was it as the Hillbilly Elegy Hillbilly Wikipedia, as the Hillbilly Elegy Wikipedia says, this explicit. This is in the summary of it. Alongside his personal history, Vance raises questions such as the responsibility of his family and people for their own misfortune. Vance blames hillbilly culture and its supposed encouragement of social rot. Comparatively, he feels that economic insecurity plays a much lesser role. It's the Mexicans crossing the border, and it's also just like hillbillies not pulling themselves up by their bootstraps. So what he did was he used old racist tropes about poor people that Republicans have been using for a long time, and then he also was really edgy and applied them to white people that he knew growing up.
And what's this thing you said about like not knowing which utensils to?
Yeah, this is another wonderful tidbit about this.
Because he's a guy. He acts like some sort of everyman, but again, he's a Yale educated guy. I found out a thing about his wife, Usha Vance, who is a lawyer herself. Well, what's interesting about her is she studied in Cambridge on a Gates Cambridge scholarship. Now, the Gates Cambridge scholarship in the UK, that's not named after like Baron von Gates from like the 14th century. That's from the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, which is just an interesting thing to note.
I mean, don't get too like.
Coincidentally, in September 2021, JD Vance called for, quote, mass civil disobedience over a vaccine mandate that wasn't a vaccine mandate. So But yet his
But so Brett,
spouse
this is
was.
the quote. There's an arresting scene in JD Vance's moving 2016 memoir, Hillbilly Elegy, in which Vance, a second-year student at Yale Law School, attends a dinner hosted by a white shoe law firm, Gibson, Dunn and Crutcher, which he describes as the most expensive restaurant he's ever eaten. Vance is stricken with social anxiety when asked whether he'd prefer Sauvignon Blanc or Chardonnay, the sparkling water or the tap. After sitting down to a place with 9 bewildering utensils, he makes a beeline for the men's room to phone his girlfriend and future wife Usha for advice. Go from outside to inside, she explains, and don't use the same utensil for separate dishes. Now, I just don't believe that. I don't believe that this guy...
that he couldn't understand at age 21 the concept between sparkling and still water.
Who's at Yale.
Yeah.
Like,
Also, no one's judging him. Have you seen Donald Trump eat? Nobody cares. You're in America. You're not in Switzerland.
And it's like you have another law school person to go call and ask like this sort of advice. Like this is... I don't know how he presents himself as some sort of everyman.
Well, it's a way for him to put on this persona that makes him in his mind seem like an everyman or in some way sympathetic. Like
also, it's like his biggest struggle. I mean, that's my favorite part. Is I'm at the Gibson Dunn. Gibson Dunn is also the law firm that was going after Stephen Donziger, just for folks to know as a reference.
Oh, that's a nice little trivia.
Yeah, very big one. And yeah, so that's a fascinating take because this guy who, oh my God, there's so much to him. I feel like this is where the New York Times, like someone needs to do the think piece about how we got here because you guys yes-anded. You said, okay, we'll have the left and now we have to have the right version, not understanding, or maybe actually understanding and not seeing the greater threat of the exponential threat of these folks who, listen, I mean, with Elon Musk buying, a stake in Twitter right now, you're going to see like this censorship culture, this bullshit censorship culture, this bullshit hillbilly elegy culture transform into, no, it's just elitist culture controlling everything. I mean, these same people who
that's Tucker Carlson, right? He conflates cultural elites, aka like the fact that white people feel talked down to by or left behind by people who are, in media or who are front facing in society. He conflates that with economic elites and it hides the ball and it pretends to be populism or it pretends to be, in some way equivalent to the left, which is challenging capital, when all they care about is like challenging culture. And oftentimes it's just women and non-white people who are at the pinnacle of the culture that they can't stand. And
anti-Semitism too. When you say challenging financial capital, it's like, you don't feel like you control all the capital anymore?
Yeah. And it's just like this guy's such a weasel. Like to Matt's, point, and I know you want to read something else, but just really quickly, like that story about sparkling versus Chardonnay and Sauvignon Blanc, he knows what audience he's appealing to, and he knows exactly who's he's endearing himself to.
Flattering, yeah.
And like that is like, the power brokers and like actual elites that he's trying to be a part of here, who are going to be charmed by a story of a hillbilly white guy, in his words, not understanding the sophistications of our culture, but him having enough merit and enough gumption and enough smarts to be a part of it. And he's riding that wave, and now he's in bed with Peter Thiel, who's newsflash, an elite.
Yeah, and speaking of elites, as he was graduating Yale University, he was encouraged to write a memoir, but none other than the Tiger Mom, Amy Chua, who just from her alleged misconduct at Yale Law School section on Wikipedia. Chua has recommended a large number of clerks for the DC circuit. Speaking of elites, as I said, controversy has arisen from allegations that Chua groomed, there's that word that the right is seemingly loving, potential clerks for the job by advising them to dress and act a certain way so as to secure employment. On September 20, 2018, The Guardian reported that Chua and another prominent Yale law professor had advised female law students at Yale that their physical attractiveness and femininity could play a role in securing a clerkship with Brett Kavanaugh.
God! Stop it!
Chua denied the allegations, pointing out that her own daughter was approved for such a position with him, which I would raise an eyebrow at that, whether the thinks that's exculpatory. Yale subsequently did not find cause to sanction Chua, and she resumed regular teaching in 2019 to 2020 school year. I'm sure Yale did a really good investigation there. She told The Guardian that her classes were among the most popular at the law school, especially for women and minorities, and that she was nominated for a Yale Law Women Teaching Award in 2019. So just the full range of the scandal there.
You know what? Also, I know you mentioned the Gates Foundation scholarship, or Gates Scholarship Foundation. Well, okay, like people get scholarships. That's obviously there's a limited pool of scholarships out there. So don't want to completely.
I would have taken one, sure.
Yeah, like you don't want to throw the baby out. There's plenty of really like amazing people that have gotten these scholarships before. But what does happen when you go to these legal institutions and you're invited to these conferences, and I've been invited to a few of these, is they actually do presentations on how, I'm not kidding you, on how you're supposed to eat at the table for the young kids.
Exactly.
True story. I went to an event in Switzerland like 6 years ago, and it was a bipartisan thing. So they were left. It was like a few days after the election of Donald Trump, and they lumped us all together, left and right. And Katrina, whatever, Pearsons and Nomi Khan's like didn't get along. Tension's really high. They put us in a room with a bunch of Swiss who don't have opinions, and they said, because you're going to be having dinners, we need to teach you stupid Americans how to eat at the table. And they did. It was like an hour-long class, on where the different glasses are placed and all the forks and knives. And several of the people were like, oh, yeah, we had to do this when we were in school. And I'm like, well, what school did you go to? Sure enough, it was like an Ivy League.
Yeah. Like that's the thing. Like, I just don't believe that, like, that's not a fish out of water to me. Like he's acting like he's acting like he's not a fish and he's in water. I don't know what I'm trying to say, but like,
no, I mean, it's like a fish out of water comedy. Like it's like one of
Except
those.
He's in water.
No, it's it's like an Adam Sandler character at a fancy dinner. Like he's just gonna
like
that's
Vance
right.
He
was fart everywhere. I don't know.
He was in the Marines to do public relations, and then he went to Ohio State. Like I just think at some point, like, he had a nice dinner, because I went to Minnesota State University Moorhead, and that was also where I had first been exposed to that sort of thing. So
yeah, and it doesn't mean that you know it either. I mean, I've seen politicians not know how to use their forks and knives before, like high ranking. It doesn't carry the same weight in the States as it does when you're living, in different parts of Europe that are a little bit more white.